go ahead and get started. I know it's freezing in here. So today we're going to be talking about graduate school, but specifically at MSSU. And so I have a handout that we'll kind of go through a little bit, and then we'll look at the school's website and kind of navigate through there. Now, how many of us have even thought about even going to a program here at this university? Okay, why? Why? I mean, what would be the benefit of potentially going here? Pros and cons, basically, I guess.
I would have to move. It's close to home.
Yeah, close to home, definitely.
Affordable.
Affordable, absolutely. I think that basically being able to stay at home and not have to get up and move is probably a big benefit, because if you decide to go to whatever university that you want to, maybe it's out of state, whatever, think of how much that's going to cost. Having to move, uproot, maybe you get a new job, start over, not to mention find a place, get to lease a place, you name it. I mean, that's a lot of additional costs. And so I think for a lot of students, they want to try to keep that cost as low as possible. And if you're already going to this university, one, you know the system already. Chances are you're going to know some of those professors, potentially, especially if it's in your area. Now, the con, I think, to go in here is that they honestly don't offer a lot of master's programs. I mean, that to me is the con. I wish that they offered more. They do have a few partnerships with a few universities, but primarily, they generally have around that 5 or 6, master's programs, here. Now, I think I have, like 5 on here, but there is criminal justice technically as well. But I've heard that they're going to be working with a partnership with another university for part of that. So, because they just don't have a really big numbers in their graduate program there. But yeah, you do know the professors, so chances are if you go here, you're going to know the system pretty easy. You'll transition, a lot faster, because graduate school, when you start there, it's completely different. I mean, the papers, the requirements that they want, and so if you can stay here, you can kind of already know what you're getting yourself into. What I like is Candace, she has started the master's program this semester. She has a business degree. And so some of the professors that she has right now for the master's, she's already had before. So she knows exactly what they want already. And so it just makes it so much easier on that front. So let's kind of look at a few of the programs that they have. You can see our handout here, so some of the graduation facts. Now this is not comprehensive. I just kind of copy and paste some of this stuff in this. They have a master's of accounting. Master's, in science and management, but they also have it where you can get a concentration in the human resources. So you can get either management or human resources related to that. Master's in curriculum and instruction. Now this is in the education department. And then, of course, the Master's of Science in Education Administration. So if you want to be a principal, you can get your degree, here. And so now one of the things that they don't always tell you is that especially education, you'll get your master's, but you still have to go and take exams, for the state of Missouri or whatever in order to become a principal. So you have to have the degree, but you also have to go out there and take some standardized tests, for the actual state itself. So that's they don't always mention that, but if you just get that master's degree, you can't just automatically be a principal. You still have to get certified through the state. Tuition. This is honestly the main thing I would be focusing on when you're looking at graduate school. Is certainly cost. Tuition. Now, I didn't add up all the other stuff. I just focused on tuition, not room and board and so forth. If you go on the website here, they can show you the breakdown. They estimate that it's around $29,000 a year, but they are factoring in room and board, transportation, any miscellaneous fee, things that may come up is around that. But just straight up tuition is $6,300, at least currently. That's for a year. So, that's honestly not too bad. Imagine, at some of these other universities where you're spending, $20,000, $30,000 a year, And if you move, what's going to happen? Chances are you are going to have to, relocate, get an apartment. In some ways, if you already have an apartment, you're paying the cost anyway. But there are students that do get to live here on campus, as well, while they're in graduate school. They live in the dorms. So I guess that's not too bad. 9 hours is considered full-time, for the graduate program. And so, how many of us thought that you'd have to go 12 hours a semester or whatever? So graduate school is different, but I will tell you that 9 hours will feel like 15 easily, because you do twice the workload. I mean that's essentially why you have less credit hours. Because most of the assignments are a little bit more intense. Now, I will say a lot depends on your department and the program that you're in. And so, but they have a little bit more work that they have to do, a lot more research and writing, for those classes, and projects and presentations. So you kind of see that. Now, some students ask me, can I, take less hours than that and still go to graduate school and still get financial aid? You can. When I was a graduate student, especially when I was getting the first master's, I ended up getting a master's in public administration. Then later on, I went and I took more graduate hours in history. I just took 18 hours for the history because I didn't really want a second master's. I just wanted the 18 hours so I could teach history classes. But the first time around, I took 6 hours a semester because I was working. And to me, that was more than enough hours because with working and trying to balance school, especially with the research papers that I was having to constantly do, 6 hours was more than enough for me. Every class that I had, I generally had a 20 to 25 page research paper, and they were very picky with what type of resources I could use and just the time and effort it took to that. So I really wanted to make sure that I had enough time to devote towards that. So if you're working and trying to go to school, you certainly want to factor that stuff in, when you're making your decision. Some people can handle working full time plus graduate school full time, but I think my concern is I didn't want to fall behind, and so I really wanted to play it safe for at least a little while on that. So what ends up happening if you take 6 hours, they count that as like 3/4, full time. Was what they consider that. One thing about graduate school related, especially here, if you're going to go to graduate school, they don't offer Pell. So that's kind of the con, there. So, you essentially have to rely heavily on student loans or potential scholarships or TA positions at some of these universities. And so, they're a little bit more limited, I think, at this university versus some other ones. Because, if you go to, a big university like the University of Arkansas or MSSU, they have a lot of TA, teacher assistant, positions and places where you can work on campus and get a stipend. I don't really know a lot of, or at least haven't heard a lot of those type of positions here, for that. So, but like I said, the tuition is relatively low, versus some of these other big universities. So you will technically save in that area. If you're going to apply here, obviously, you have to fill out an application. There's a $35 application charge, for that. On the website, they'll go into more details about the dates and stuff when you can apply. Now, I can tell you from experience what I've seen is that even though they have that date, I've seen people apply past that date a little bit and still get in. And so that's kind of good in a way. So if you're kind of not on the fence a little bit whether or not you're going to go, I say just apply, just get it over with so at least you can find out. It's not like you have to necessarily go. $35 is actually a relatively cheap application fee. There are some that are a lot more expensive than that. And so that's not too bad. Obviously, official transcripts, all that stuff. Another question that I always get is, do you still have to have unofficial transcripts if you come from this university? Yes. You still have to go through the clearinghouse and order those in order to have them sent, because we actually go through a different agency for the actual official transcript. So you still actually have to pay and get transcripts sent here, which is a little weird. But so you do actually have to do that. Then you have to pay, a non-refundable transcript evaluation charge, $25, so they can evaluate your transcripts. And then, of course, some additional paperwork. Well, let's look at requirements. In order to actually apply to the program, what you have to meet. At least a 2.75 or higher finishing GPA in your undergraduate work. Now, some programs, require a little bit more than that. Sometimes it's 3.0, depending on the program. But that's kind of more the general requirement. So that's not too bad. And then honestly, there's a lot of universities that kind of fit into that category right there. Obviously, you have to have a bachelor's degree. That's important. One thing that you do not have to have, and this is what I really want us to pay attention to. Let's say you have a degree in sociology, psychology, or English. Can you get a degree in business here? Yes. You do not actually have to have a degree in business to get a master's in business, from this university. Now, what's kind of a pro and con of that? What's the pro of that? Obviously, you can start the business program. You don't have to have all those business classes. That makes it kind of easy there. But what's the con? You didn't take the undergraduate class, so you're going to be at a slight disadvantage because, and this is something that Candace was telling me just the other day, and that is, she had a lot of the, business. I mean, she has a business degree. She had a lot of the same type of classes with the same professors. And so there are some in her program right now that are really struggling because they've never had any business classes. For her, it's almost like a review for some of the stuff that she's doing in there. She remembers covering that as an undergraduate. So she kind of has a bit of an advantage in there. And so a lot of them have actually gone to her and asked her questions because a lot of the stuff she's already covered at one point. And so that's, kind of the benefit of taking some of those business classes. So if you're remotely interested in going to business, I would always suggest try to take a couple business classes, if you can, before you graduate, just so you know what you're kind of getting yourself into a little bit. And honestly, you may be actually taking, a couple professors that you will have in graduate school. Nichols, for example, who teaches a lot of business classes, especially in finance, you're going to encounter him, in graduate school. So if you can have a couple undergraduate classes with him, you kind of know what to expect. And I think that would be with any program, whether it's education, accounting, or whatever it may be. So other programs, just to kind of mention, some other universities. When I was working on my master's in history, even though I only went there for that 18 hours that I was wanting, there were still certain qualifications I had to meet. I didn't have to have a bachelor's degree in history at that university either, but they required me to have at least 24 undergraduate hours in history. So if you're not looking at this university and you decide, hey, maybe I'll go somewhere else, just keep that in mind. Hey, come on in.
I'm going to schedule.
So,
You're recording, right?
Yes, I am. No, you come on in. You come on in. And let everyone know who showed up late. Sapporo. So that's going to be one of the questions on the quizzes. So, yes. No, too late. I'm not even going to mention the other person because, I'm going to be nice. So. Okay, so one of the things that you want to look at is if you're going to this university or you're going to go somewhere else, make sure that you meet those requirements. That's very important. And so, so just make sure that you meet those requirements. Another question: do you have to take the GRE here? No. So, which is nice because GRE costs over $200 to take the exam, and so it is an expensive exam. A lot of universities do use it. There are some that don't. You have a question?
Is there any other requirements, like tests, and so you don't do that GRE, but is there any other entrance exams or anything?
So what they will look at, and it explains more on the website, and we're going to look at some of this more in depth, but one of the things that they look at is GPA, and you see how they have that 2.75. Now, there are some programs that that really want you to have around a 3.0. And so they may say if you don't meet the GPA requirement, they may have you take the GRE at that point. And so that's why it's an incentive to make sure you have your GPA good. Like when I was applying to OU, most of the programs there required the GRE. But my specific program had a stipulation: if you had a good GPA, basically 3.0 or higher, you didn't have to have the GRE. So I didn't have to take the GRE because of that. And so it worked out. It saved me money, and I'm horrible at those standardized tests, and so I knew I wasn't going to do well if I took that, and so I really did not want to do that. And we were talking earlier, a lot of online programs don't require that as well. It depends. And that's the thing. It's hard to say that this is all set in stone because every university is different on how they do things. And so this particular university, our college, doesn't require the GRE, especially if you meet the GPA. If it's not exactly where they want it to be, then they may decide for you to take the GRE, to see if you can get in. And so, but obviously you have to have your bachelor's degree. That's obviously given. If we flip on the back side of this paper, we'll look at a few other things. So obviously you want to make sure that you apply to the right program, and all that stuff. You'll have your basic information that you'll have to set up, and Social Security number, email, all that stuff. You're going to be filling out. You look for those important deadlines. Even though I can tell you, I've seen people apply after the deadline and still get in. So I mean, it's good if you can, follow the deadline. But I have seen people get in. You still need to fill out your FAFSA and all that stuff. That's important. Now, why is that important? If you're not getting Pell, if you're not getting Pell, why would it be important to fill out your FAFSA? Loans, yes, because the vast majority of students, including myself, when I went to graduate school, I took no student loans as an undergrad. I got Pell and scholarships, and actually I came out ahead each semester at least a little bit. That's how I lived on. Was having that little extra, especially with scholarships. And so I graduated debt-free with my bachelor's, and then all the debt came with the master's program. This is finally my year that I should be able to pay off my student loans. When I graduated, I had $64,000, a little over that, in student loans. And it's been 10 years, and this is the 10 years mark that I've been paying on those student loans. And so I'm reminded every single month of graduate school when I make that payment. And so I'm ready. I'm ready to have it paid off. Graduate school loans have a higher interest, so that you got to factor that into things, because most undergrad right now is probably 4%, give or take, somewhere in that range. Graduate school loans are generally in that 5-something to 6%, some even higher than that. And so you can almost bank it'll be at least in the 5 to 6% range. And so I mean it adds up. I was looking at my statement last month, and I was trying to factor in how much I paid in interest, and it shows me, and of course it scares me every time, I have paid over $20,000 in interest, just in interest. And so they tell you that if you borrow, we'll say hypothetically, $30,000, if you do the minimum payment that they allow you to, and for those, as long as they'll let you, you'll normally pay, close to $60,000, close to it, if you have $30,000 in student loans. You're almost doubling. If you do the minimum payment. So it's always important to be able to try to pay it off as early as you can because of all that interest. And so factor that stuff into when you're trying to decide which university. That's why I like, Missouri Southern, because, tuition, what we talked about earlier, $6,300 a year. Not bad, versus some other, places. Now, obviously, we're not factoring in books. Books will average probably around maybe, $800 a year. Give or take, they're a little bit more expensive, for books. Some classes may require more than one book, and so.
You still get graduate level books on Amazon?
Yeah, you can still do that. Yes, you can still look around. That they kind of, tell you what you need, and then you can go shop around and find the best deal. Now, I don't know about the business, because I know business program undergrad, they have you use like a special program that you register for or whatever. You buy one of those online things. So I don't know if that's going to be the case for graduate school or not. I know undergrad, they use that. Was it Synergy or something like that? I don't know what it's called. So I don't know if they do that for graduate school or not. And so Candace would know, for sure on that. But they roughly estimate on the school's website that's somewhere around the $800 range. Hopefully it's less than that. But and honestly, keep in mind, if you're not going full time, obviously you're paying slightly less than that. So. And I would always encourage students, probably to keep it at around the 6 hours if it was me, if you're working, instead of the 9 hours. So if you're going to work, I would honestly take just slightly less if it was me. And so some other things that we'll look at, obviously they like for you to contact the director, the program that you're interested in. I think that's always a good thing because you can talk to them about deadlines, about what classes. They can kind of give you an idea of kind of what you're getting yourself into. I remember when I was going to go to OU, I talked to the director of the program. I asked questions about the workload, about the assignments. I asked as many questions as I could. Just so I know what I'm kind of getting myself into, because I was working, and so I was really kind of nervous whether or not I could balance, everything. And then of course, some want you to have a resume or a curriculum vitae. That's what that CV means. When you're applying, personal statement. Sometimes they'll have you write. And then, of course, remember, if you don't have a good GPA, sometimes they'll have you take the GRE just in case. What I want to do is look at a couple programs so we can kind of see what you're kind of getting yourself into. So we'll look at the management one real fast, because this one tends to be a pretty popular one.
So may or may not have to do a personal statement?
Yeah, it really. I can tell you for business, you will. If you're going for the business degree, I know that you have to do that. It all comes down. Yeah, you'll have to do a personal statement. I remember Candace, or writing hers. They're not that picky on that. I mean, most of the time they just want to know why are you trying to get a degree, in business. They want to know what you're going to do with it, what you're trying to accomplish. So it's generally not too bad. And most of the time it's like 1 or 2 pages, if that. I mean, it's not very intense. So let's kind of scroll down here. Let's see if we can find the core curriculum. This is what I care about, curriculum. Look at the classes that you actually have to take, because this will be your life for a little while. Normally, graduate school is 2 years, typically, if you go full time. Now, if you are taking 6 hours, like for me, it took me 2.5 years because I took 6 hours this semester, so it took me just a little bit longer, but I was okay with that, because I did not want to put myself under that amount of stress. And so, budgeting and financial controls. So, if you have never had any type of finance class, that may be a little difficult. So I'd always say try to take something, as an undergrad to give you at least a little bit of an idea of what you're going to get yourself into. The data analysis, decision making. Yes, it's an upper level management class. There's probably going to be some math, a little bit of math in there, a little bit of statistics, related, to that. Contemporary organizational management. Could be probably more terms. You're going to be writing papers, obviously, for that. And then, of course, you see like the leadership and ethics, you're going to be writing. I can guarantee you will be writing, in that class. So there is a fair amount of writing. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to be writing 20-page papers. I don't think that's generally the case, when it comes to, the business classes. But you can certainly, see maybe a 10-page, 15-page paper, give or take, in that area. And so, but there will certainly be math, when it comes to this. So if you are not a math person, you may not want to do that. So let's look at the human resources. So in addition to these core, kind of classes that you take up here, this is the track for the human resources. So those are some of those additional classes that you will take. Most programs generally are in the 30-something hour range. You can look at a variety of different programs that are out there, but most of the time, in order to get your master's degree, it's going to be somewhere in the 30s. I think mine was 33 or something. It was kind of a weird number. 33 hours, I think it was, somewhere around there. But most tend to be, in the low 30s to mid, 30 credit hours range. And so certainly doable. When you look at these classes, do these classes even look remotely interesting to you? Definitely you're looking at like, yeah, I think I like that. And so, but to me, this is important to look at. Like if you're looking at these like, I don't know about that, this is probably not for you. And that's the same thing I tell students when you're looking at undergrad, for your major. If you start looking at all those different classes that you will be taking, and you don't like them, and you think, I have no interest, I wouldn't do it. Because if you think about it, that's all you do in that major once you get through all your gen eds. And it's the same thing like when you go to graduate school. That's 2 years of your life, that you'll be taking. And so I kind of found out the hard way, because when I got my master's in public administration, I hated the classes. I absolutely hated them. Now there was a couple of classes that were okay. I chose a major because my degree was in political science. I didn't feel like I could really do a lot with that, especially undergrad. And so people were telling me, well, I can go to law school, or you can go to public administration, maybe work for the city as a city manager or something. And the public administration program was technically housed in the political science department at OU. So there was a lot of classes that kind of tied into it. So I felt that would be more of a natural fit for me. But I just wasn't interested in a lot of that stuff. And it made it more difficult. Because when you are given an assignment to write a 25-page paper on something, it's a little difficult, staying motivated throughout the entire semester. So I struggled with that, the interest. When I went back and took 18 graduate hours in history, I loved it. It was a completely different experience. I had no problem writing the papers. I enjoyed writing them. I actually started early writing on them because I just enjoyed the material. So my experience at that university was a lot different because of my interests. So I'd always say whatever master's program you choose, make sure you actually enjoy it, or it's going to be a bad experience overall because of that. Because from college, you have to be self-motivated and keep up with everything. The professors are not going to hound you, about getting stuff in, especially graduate school. And the work will be harder. So you do need to make sure that you actually have a passion for it. So this is the master's program, the classes that you would take. Now I will say that it is a good program here, one of the better ones. I certainly think education is really good here. I think they're pretty well known for that. This tells you, it's a little bit more broken down in detail what you would take. So 30 credit hours, if you wanted to basically be a principal one day, this is the program that you would take. Now I can also tell you some choose this master's program for other reasons. And that is, what if you did not get a degree in education? Can you still get a master's in this? Yes. In the state of Missouri, it's a little bit different. And that is, if you do not have a degree in teaching, you can still, become a teacher by going and working on your master's degree to become a teacher. Like in Oklahoma, for example, you can have a bachelor's, degree, not in teaching related. All you have to do is take exams, and you can become a teacher. It's an alternative certification. But here, for their program, they require you to get a master's degree. If you did not become a teacher, the traditional way.
Yeah, I have a question though. Like, only here in Missouri, so if you were to go to like Arkansas or something around the area, could you still use that master's degree?
Every state is different. Like when it comes to so for example, my wife, she has a degree in teaching. So she went the traditional route, got a bachelor's degree in elementary education. Now she got certified, for Oklahoma where she teaches, but she's also certified in Missouri, Kansas, not Arkansas, but what she had to do is that once she already had her teacher's license, and she was established, and she wasn't like on probation or anything, because normally you get like a temporary license, in the beginning, and then as you get a little bit more experience, you get like a more permanent, long-term one. And so because she'd already been teaching for a while and had been certified for quite a while, it's a much easier process. She basically just had to pay them money, and then they gave her her certificate. So chances are you'd probably have to work a little bit, in that probably state or something, and then apply.
Okay.
Most likely. I mean, every state is different on how they do it. I know, like, I'll give you an example. Like Oklahoma, your teacher's certificate is like 7 years. You have to renew every 7 years, typically. It's a little bit shorter, like if you're a beginning teacher. In Missouri, 99 years. Like when my wife, applied for there, they gave her one that is good for 99 years. So basically the rest of her life. Oklahoma, it makes you reapply all these years because of what? Money. She has to pay money every 7 years, basically to renew. And it's not super cheap. I mean, I think it's like $50, $60 the last time I think it was. But yeah, she's going to have to do that off and on, But yeah, Missouri, you pay one time. It's 99 years, that you get. And so she'll never have to worry about that. So she figures, I'm going to continue to teach in Oklahoma. When I retire from here, maybe I'll go work in Missouri for a while. She'll do it that way because she still has her certification, obviously. So every state's just different. Like Oklahoma, like I know Texas, part of the certification process, if she wanted to teach there, she has to take a Texas history class. That's part of the requirement there. She'd have to take one of those, Texas history. So you just kind of have to go on to the Board of Education, their website for each state, and then kind of look at that. But for Missouri, the other path is basically getting a master's degree. So you do have some that will go that route because maybe they got their bachelor's in something else, but they decide they want to teach. I say, if you really want to teach that bad, just take, you take 3 exams in Oklahoma, and then you can be a teacher. And actually, you only have to take 2 exams before you can actually start teaching. The 3rd exam you have to take within like the first 3 years of teaching. So it's actually not too bad. And that's what and you don't have to worry about a master's, in Oklahoma, if you become alternatively certified. But here in Missouri, you got to take master's program if you don't have a degree in education, undergraduate. So imagine which one's more expensive. Master's degree, you have to get in Missouri, or you can go to Oklahoma and take a couple exams. So, now you may not want to live in Oklahoma, so that may, decide that you don't want to do that. But some people could easily go work in Miami, if they wanted, and still be able to live. Or Grove, And so that's where my wife works, is in Grove. So this is a good program. Master's program for education, especially if you want to be a principal. Principals make good money, Now keep in mind, you do have to get board certification through Missouri besides this. Yes?
What about the curriculum and instruction? Would that work for a teacher?
Yeah, I mean, I know I've known a few teachers that have gotten that type of degree. Normally, what ends up happening is they end up working eventually for what they call like the office, like the central office of the administration of the school, and they help create the curriculum for that the school district. They don't offer a ton of those positions, and so I mean, for some teachers get a master's because they get a different pay scale if you have a master's degree. That's why a lot of teachers go on to get a master's degree, because they have two different pay scales. They have a pay scale for those who have a bachelor's degree, then they have a pay scale for those who have a master's degree. There's generally a couple $1,000 difference for each year, difference. And so, I mean, it pays in the long run, with the master's. So you may just have one teacher, who has a bachelor's degree that's getting, I'm just going to say hypothetically, $44,000. And then you may have that same teacher with the same amount of experience as that person has, but they have a master's, so they may be getting, $46,000 and something, give or take. And so there's normally a couple $1,000 difference, per year. So it does add up over, the long run. And if you do ever want to advance, you have to have a master's degree in order to be a principal. You can't become a principal with a bachelor's degree. So you have to have a master's. Specifically, they want it in administration. You have to take, like I said, an exam through the state of Missouri or Oklahoma, wherever you're at, and pass in order to get your license to be a principal. And then once you will renew that license, obviously, X amount of years. But principals can make good money. I mean, they make around $80,000-$90,000 in Missouri. So I mean, it's not bad and stuff. But I will tell you, those who are wanting to get this master's degree and work in this field, it's tough. I mean, you think about, if you're a regular school teacher, you get to go home at the end of the day. Obviously you're responsible for your class. Principal is responsible for everything. Any issue that goes on with that, school, it goes through you. And so, I mean, they may be making $80,000, $90,000 a year, but I think they earn every penny of it. Because if there's one, mad person, parent or anyone, or maybe you're having issues with teachers and all that stuff, you're dealing with it. And they don't get that traditional summer off like everyone else does. They normally get 1 month off. A lot of them take off in July, and so at least in Oklahoma it's like that. And so they normally are working in June, and then they get 1 month off normally, at least in Oklahoma. So, all right, let's look at another one, criminal justice. So how many of you are even remotely interested in criminal justice? Okay, all right. So. What is your undergrad right now?
Criminal justice.
Okay, so this would probably be a very easy transition for you because you're already going to know the professors. I mean, the only real difference a lot of times is that you'll have a few more projects, a little bit more additional work, in those classes, mainly papers. You will see, and so kind of tells you the breakdown of what you have to take. So let's look up here at the major requirements, kind of the core courses. Total, you have to have 36 hours. Now remember that we saw the one program that was 30 hours. So that's why I always say it's somewhere in the 30s. Some programs have 30 hours, some have around that 36. I've even seen some that were in the low 40s. It just depends on the program and the institution that you're at. But if you look at those core classes, you will notice statistics. Almost every graduate program you're going to encounter in some capacity is going to have a statistics class. How many of us have taken statistics? Yes, I hate statistics. Some people are good at math.
Wrong teacher.
Oh no, it's all me. It was all my fault. I can tell you that. I waited my last semester to graduate the master's program to take that class. I barely passed. And I think she probably pitied me. She's like, I know this is your last semester because you told me like 1,000 times, trying to guilt me into passing you. And I did pass, barely. And so yeah, now sometimes they have a set curriculum where they want you to take certain classes each semester. Where I was at, they were a little bit more flexible in that. You could kind of take what classes that you wanted. There wasn't really hardly prerequisites. You have to have this class before the other, at least where I was at. So there was a lot more flexibility there. They may be a little bit different. It all depends on the program. You'll have an advisor that will sit down with you and tell you what they want you to take. A lot of these classes, will either be at nighttime or online. That's the typical, schedule, at least around here. You will see that quite often. Because it's really designed, in my opinion, for a lot of working adults. And so, like Candace's schedule this semester, is at night. And now that doesn't mean it'll be like that every single semester, but you do typically see that, quite often. And so, which is nice. Like the master's program that I was in, it was night classes. It was 3-hour, lectures. We met 1 day a week for each class. So normally I would either go on a Monday and a Wednesday or whatever it may be, but class would start at 6 o'clock. We would get done at 9 o'clock. And so it was a long class. And so definitely tiring at times. Now I was driving, 55 miles one way, to go to this college. So it's normally, I worked during the daytime. Then I got off work, I drove up there, I would eat something, wait for class, and then get done at 9 something, and then of course to drive home. So most of the times I'd get home about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night range, and then get up, around 5:30, 6 o'clock, and do it all over again. And so you got to be dedicated. And you just got to find what works for you, when it comes to that. And that's why I say, if you can take 6 hours rather than 9. It may actually be more beneficial to you because maybe you won't be under as much pressure, and at least starting off, I would do that just so you can see how you adjust, to the program. You may, start 6 hours and you're like, what, I can handle this, there's no problem, and then you take 9 hours the next semester, and that's fine. But I would always say, start off a little easier because what if you have a really bad semester? Life happens, events happen, and so, just try to create that easy first semester so that way it doesn't scare you off completely, with the master's program. But yes, you will write, you will do math a little bit, in there. And then you have some flexibility, especially criminal justice, when it comes to the electives, which I really like that. There's a lot of flexibility there. You just have to have 12 hours, and you kind of pick those classes that you want. When you're dealing with the independent study, I can tell you, you're writing. You're writing, you're doing research, and you're writing. So some people think, oh yeah, I'll just do the independent study, it won't be that bad. You're going to have a big project in there. You'll work it out with your professor, but you generally will write a lot. And then you also have different options, like down here, you have your thesis or non-thesis option. Just to kind of tell you a little bit about that, because that is very common with graduate school. I had to do a thesis, for my master's program. Like I said, every place is different, what they have you do. Some give you the option. You can do the thesis or the non. The non is basically you take exams. Towards the very end, you are basically tested on your knowledge of what you learned in the master's program. It's generally pretty tough. And so I went with the paper. The paper is not easy either, but I went with that instead. I remember my thesis was 40. I think it was ended up being like 47 pages because it was actually a lot more than that, but the professor made me cut some stuff, what he considered fluff, I guess. So he's a little picky on it. My paper was 47 pages on whether or not smoking ventilation systems were effective, in like restaurants and different establishments. It was a very boring paper. And so, but I chose that topic because I wanted that professor. I got to have an assigned professor that was going to basically kind of advise me for my master or for my thesis. And so you generally encounter that a lot. You'll be assigned to someone, and then they kind of help you along the process, kind of telling you what you need to write, how they kind of look at your stuff along the way. Because ours was like chapters, so we had to write various chapters. So I'd have to do a couple of chapters, and then you'd have to approve it before I could move on to the next. And so, but I chose him specifically because he was a great professor. I had him for a couple of classes. I knew he was one of those professors that'd be very picky, but also would be helpful at the same time. And so that's why I chose that particular topic, because that was his area of expertise, was tobacco policy. And so that was why. And so if you have to do a thesis, it's good to be looking at certain professors and looking at their interests. So that way you can kind of lean on them and get some assistance there. It's just different. Graduate school is different, no matter whether you're going to this university or somewhere else. It's a lot of work. And so what do we think so far about the master's program here? What captures your attention? What things you like or dislike?
Well, GRE.
No GRE, yes, definitely.
Awesome.
I certainly, like that myself. What else? What else do you like?
Price.
Price is good. Most universities, I mean, like when you get a master's, it can be anywhere from $30,000-$60,000 range, for a master's. It just all depends where you're going, and how long it takes, as well and stuff. One thing, that you always have to kind of look at is that, and I haven't actually seen it really on this website, so I'm not exactly sure. But some universities have certain policies where, you have to have a certain GPA. Like at OU where I was at, you could only have in our program 2 C's. If you had more than 2 C's, you're out of the program. And so every university is different on how they do that.
And that's just for the master's classes?
Yeah, like in our...
Because when you go to graduate school, I mean, everything transfers over. You still have to do your transcript, but it kind of starts over, right?
Yeah, none of that stuff really counts on. I mean, now obviously you have to have that to get in the program. I mean, you have to have your bachelor's. They'll look at that, look at your GPA, but your GPA starts over. I mean, basically with graduate school, because you're taking what they consider 500 and 600 level courses. Now, some universities they'll call it 5,000 or 6,000 level. I mean, it depends on the university you're at. Here, it's 500, 600 level. If you think about a senior, what is it? It's 400. 400 and whatever. So graduate school is 500, and above. And so it starts over GPA. But like I said, every program is different on what they require. Like some say, you have to maintain at least an overall GPA of 3.0 to stay in the program. A lot of universities are like that. I don't think it's quite like that. I think you go a little below that, here. So you always want to be asking, like when you have to, remember on this when we're looking at this little sheet, and it says talk to, the director of the program. Those are important questions to ask them, about those policies. Like in your specific program, how many C's are we allowed to, have? At OU, it was spelled out in their booklet, it was 2. If you have more than 2 C's, you are gone. And so there was some pressure there. I mean, it wasn't. Through the most part, you pretty much had to make A's and B's, in that program. And so that's why for me, taking those 2 classes, 6 hours a semester, I felt was better for me because it allowed me to make sure that I could try to keep those grades up. I remember my first semester at OU, I had an A and a C my first semester because. And I thought I was doing well, but what it was is that they have a specific way of how to write papers, and I wrote the paper that I thought how to write any paper. They wanted Chicago style, when it came to the citation, so I did that. I thought that was fine, but then I got marked off significant, not for my content, but for my structure, because they said we wanted it in a public policy format. I'm like, I don't know how to do that, and they said, well, it's on the school's website. I'm like, well, where was it on the? Because I had no idea where it was, and no one told me where it was at. And eventually, they showed me. It's like you have to go through all these different ways to get there, and they're like, well, you should know. And so my paper, I ended up getting a low D because of that, and that paper was worth a significant amount of points, and so it dropped me, to a high C, and so obviously I learned from my mistake. And then of course I had a C in statistics, so I got my 2 C's. That was my last semester. I got that C, and so I was fine. And so yeah, it was a little bit more challenging, and so there I always felt like I was under pressure, to keep that A or B in the class. So it's good to be asking questions to the director of the program that you're interested here. You can ask them anything that you want. It's better to ask all these questions now before you actually get into the program, and you're end up being surprised with something. And so, but yeah, supportability. I mean, that's one of the main reasons why I think people should look at the university here, and also the fact that chances are you're going to know the professors at least a little bit. Especially if you've had any classes undergraduate with them. Like with you being a criminal justice major, you're going to know the professors, and you're going to know kind of what to expect from them. And so that to me is very important. You can't, really, that's so valuable, when you're starting. Because when I was starting at OU, I didn't know anything. I didn't know any of the professors. I mean, the system was completely new to me. And so there was an adjustment period because of that. Eventually I caught on and it worked out, but it was a little bit more difficult. And I know when I was working on my master's at a different university, it was UCO, for the history classes, just the level of intensity I had at OU, it was nothing compared to UCO. It actually felt pretty easy there, because of that, just because of the intensity. And so do your research. This is one alternative. Applying here, I do think you should always apply for at least maybe 2 or 3 different universities. So I don't think it's just this university alone. I do think you need to apply to a few others. Yes.
These are all, for the masters, they're all in-class instruction, correct?
No,
Like
not all. Some
so
are
they do
online.
have
Yeah.
online
Yes.
options?
Yes. Yeah.
And then you said they're mostly evening, correct? Like-
Yeah, a lot of times you will see evening classes. I'd say a vast majority of them tend to be evening or online.
Do they have day option as well then?
I have seen a few of the day classes offered. I mean, it's kind of a mixture of that, but I would say it seems like it's a little bit more geared towards evening time. Some of the best things to do is just go and look at the classes, the schedule book. So like if we decide we want to look, one of the things that you can do is just click here, go to the search engine, and this is something that I've always enjoyed doing, just going and looking at the classes that they offer. So when we go look at just regular classes, we can go and click on here, and then you can kind of narrow it down to graduate classes. And so we'll put that into our search. We'll put in the semester that we want, and this will give you an idea exactly what you're signing yourself up for, like times-wise, when they offer things. So let's look at more of those accounting classes. You can see they're night times pretty much, for the most part. You can kind of see them there. So definitely evening time. All right, let's go and look at education. Education is pretty much online. I mean, and that's why this works out great for teachers, because the majority of all the stuff they're doing, they can almost get an online degree, for the education program here. And so for a lot of teachers, they choose this college for that.
Is the curriculum online too? Can you see?
I don't know if it is or not. And so, I mean, it seems like all the education class, at least for the fall, every single one of them is online. And then if you look at, the management, which would be if you're going like human resources and so forth, you can take a look there. They're all night, pretty much. And so yeah, I mean, this, in my opinion, it's more designed for that working adult who is working during the day, who wants to take class. Now, you may work late at night, so maybe it won't interfere necessarily with that that schedule there. Maybe you'll get out in time to be able to go to a night shift or something. Most of it tends to be kind of in that 6 o'clock range, 6:30 range, 7 o'clock, give or take. A lot of it's kind of in there. And if you notice, 1 day a week. So most of those is 1 day a week that you take. So not too bad. And then of course they give you projects, and you're spending the rest of the week just working on that one thing. So I mean, they will keep you busy. So even though it's 1 day a week, you will still be putting in a lot of time, for that. And so do your research, look at some of this stuff, see if it fits into your time schedule. But it does seem like a lot of it's just 1 day a week at nighttime or online. So I mean, every semester is different, how it changes up. So questions on this. What do we think so far? Does it seem like it's kind of doable, at least at this university, for maybe a few programs here, I guess.
Yeah.
So,
I didn't
but
even think about it until I came.
yeah,
I didn't either, because I just saw that it's limited right now, that they only have so many master's programs, and I was like, well,
Yeah.
I'm a psych major, and none of them are in psychology, so I didn't know.
yeah, that's the
I
con.
didn't even see
that
this as an
is
option.
yeah, it's not, and that is one of the biggest con. I mean, they just don't offer a lot of programs, and so for some, it's either choose a different area, go to that, or you sometimes have to either look for online programs, or maybe transfer or go to like MSU, University of Arkansas, or Pitt State. Even though I don't think they have a ton of master's programs either. Normally, for those very specialized programs, you pretty much got to go to like MSU, University of Arkansas, some of the bigger name colleges where they they just have a lot of different programs. Now Pitt State does have a couple of good programs there too, and I've heard that they're working on trying to get it where you can kind of get that social work degree more here. You get your degree at MSU, but they have like a satellite campus where you can come here in Joplin for a lot of almost all of your classes, and so that's not too bad. So you want to really look around, do your research before you make your final decision on where you're going to go. Because the decision you make now will depend on how much you're going to be paying. Now there are some fields that pay really good, and so financially it may be worth the cost. But I'm always a paranoid person when it comes to that stuff. I always want to figure out, well, one, I didn't think I was going to go into education. When I was working on my master's, I had no desire to work at a university. Now I was working at a university while I was working on my master's. But it's because I did that as a student, and it just kind of worked out that way. And so, but I was planning on working for the city management, and then I started to have an opportunity to teach a little bit, adjuncting when I was working on my master's, and I just felt like it seemed like all my experience was related to education, and so it seemed like everything was just pushing me in that direction, and then so I went that route. Obviously, education doesn't pay a lot of money. It's just you're not going to make the big bucks, doing that. And so you always want to be careful about how much student loans you're taking, because if I would have went city management route, I would have been able to pay off those student loans a lot faster. Because city managers typically make about $100,000, $150,000, depending on how big of a city that you work in and stuff. And so education. A teacher. Actually teachers like public school teacher typically makes more money than what a person makes at a university, like regular staff person. And so, professors obviously have to generally have your PhD. They may make around 50, 60, if that, at a university. Depends on how big the university that you're at. Funny story, when I was a student at MSSU, when I was working on my bachelor's degree, my professor, who was one of my favorite professors, he told me how much money he made. He had, of course, PhD, had wrote 3 books on terrorism. Very, very, really good professor. Went to a big name university, Chapel Hill. He was making $36,000 a year. This is 2005. 2005, $36,000 a year. PhD, wrote numerous books, at least 3 that were published.
He's still working.
He's probably retired now. He's about 66, 67 now. I don't know if he's, but I know he's working about 2 years ago, but I haven't talked to him in a couple of years. But yeah, now he made extra money by teaching additional classes. That's how he was able to come out ahead. Like he would, normally you have a certain, professors, you generally teach 4 or 5 classes. That's part of your contract. So if you teach 6 classes, you get kind of overload pay. So you get paid a little bit more to teach that additional class. And he would teach in the summertime. And so that 36 would normally turn into that low to mid 45 range. Now this is a small university. It's not a big name or anything like that. Now if you go and teach, let's say at OU, you're going to be making about $70,000, $80,000, give or take. If you have some experience, you've been around a little bit. So, and there are some professors here that are making around $70,000, $80,000, but they have been here for 15, 20 years and stuff. So it's it just depends on how long you've been there and so forth. So you just want to factor that stuff into when you're thinking about graduate school, because at the end of the day, at some point, you will start making those student loan payments and get grouchy like I do every single month, and I make that payment and stuff. And I'm always trying to pay extra on it and stuff. So it's became almost like a mortgage. I pay $500 a month right now. That's what I pay. My bill's actually like $447 a month. I pay $500, but I've also been paying a lot of extra. Like I'll throw in $5,000 on it here and there. And I did one. I wrote him a check for like $18,000 here recently. I'm trying to pay the thing off. And so because I've been saving for a while, but I've always been kind of paranoid. Like I don't want to spend all this money on it, and then the emergency comes up, and so I've been dragging my feet a little bit on that. But now I'm at the point where I'm just like, what, I'm so tired of it, and I'm just trying to do what I can to get it paid off. So because every time I look at how much interest I paid, I just think, man, I got to get this paid off. Because I'll give you an example. When I first started paying my student loan, over 300 and something of it was going towards interest a month. And so, I mean, it was a pretty big chunk. I mean, I was the principal, I was only knocking off about $100-something a month from the principal.
So does it change over time? Do you start paying mainly interest at the beginning and over time it decreases to where you're paying more towards the principal? Or is it kind of the same across the board?
They have a lot of different like payment plans you can do. Like they have some where you can you start off a smaller amount, and then as certain years the thing gradually goes up, like your payment, and they can do that. Now mine, I had it set where it was 20 years. I had it set, and I pay a certain amount, but then I just pay extra. Start knocking it down.
I've heard like you can pay also, correct me if I'm wrong, but you can pay like on certain loans. So
Yeah.
like, if one loan's collecting more interest, you can pay that, if you know that, pay that one off.
Yeah.
Before you start paying the other ones that are collecting less or.
Yeah. And so one thing, what I did eventually was I ended up combining because I mean you get these loans that are from different places. One had some more interest rates. So what I did is I consolidated, where it was all in one with the lowest interest rate I could get, which was still high. My interest rate is 5.785. I will always know that number. So that's what the interest is. Every month, on that. And so now, thinking back when I had over 300 something in interest every month. Right now, I think the last time I looked, it was like $60 in interest.
So it tapered off for you.
Yeah, so it's getting there. It's finally starting to get there. I'll get it paid off this year, but it's just it's been years in the making. So when I say when you're looking at graduate school, I didn't think about any of that stuff. I just didn't. And I wish I would have. And so that's why I always try to tell students to think about that, because I didn't. And so, because I always thought, I'll have the money then. I'll have it then, but, it's happening. I'm getting it paid off, but it was just, it just felt like it was either a house payment or at least a car payment every month. And if you're trying to do other things as well, it gets a little tight at times. So, any questions? Any questions at all? All right, that's all I got. I'll have you fill out that evaluation, what you think, and, that's it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.